Welcome, sorcerers! I'm your humble host, Eunice, and you're watching Contested Cards. In this episode, I'd like to take a close look at everything we currently know about Sorcery Contested Realms' upcoming second set, and speculate to what it might entail. But before we get to the juicy stuff, we first have to establish the basics. What is Arthurian Legends? What are Arthurian Legends? Who was Arthur, and why was he a legend? So join me as we dive into the realm of Camelot, Avalon, and the Knights of the Round Table. The story of King Arthur originates from Celtic poetry and was much later adapted and translated by several authors, most of them adding on elements that we would now consider part of the Arthurian canon. To this day, we do not know if Arthur was based on a real person, if he was a king or just a commander. But we do know that most of what we would consider part of the story, like the Knights of the Round Table, the Holy Grail, or Arthur's love triangle, to be a pure work of fantastical fiction. Historical accuracy aside, the story of King Arthur who pulled the sword from stone provides a great world for the next sorcery set to be based on. It's a fantastical world filled with great heroes, evil villains, dragons, and, most important of all, lots of magic. But it's also full of betrayal, demons, and incest, so there's that. Either way, it seems a perfect playground for fantasy art and card mechanics. Arthurian legends don't just stem from one work of literature, but several. While most adaptations we now know are based on Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur, a French translation and compilation of many earlier works that added on elements like the Round Table or making the Grail holy. While we can be certain that Arthurian Legends will be Eric Scariosa's own take on the material, probably taking liberty with tone and atmosphere, there are several characters that will surely make an appearance in one form or another. To prepare you for the setting, here is a quick rundown of the most important characters in these stories. So, of course, there's Arthur, who became king in his teenage years after pulling the legendary sword Caliburn, or more commonly known as Excalibur, from the stone in the lake. Or is that a different sword from the one he gets from the Lady of the Lake? Well, anyways, this legitimizes his claim to the throne. After that, he went on to become a great and respected man of countless victories in battle, residing in his castle Camelot. The embodiment of a wise leader and a righteous king, but again, also a tragic figure that ends up killing a bunch of babies and getting betrayed by his own illegitimate son and one of his knights. His trusty advisor Merlin, an old mage with a specialty in shapeshifting, who played a big part in Arthur's upbringing, as well as Arthur finding and pulling the sword. He also got a somewhat sketchy background in some versions of the text, being sometimes portrayed as a child of a demon incubus, and even the Antichrist himself, which the sorcery team could very well lean into. Guinevere, Arthur's love and later his queen, who's kinda more into the lands a lot. Well, she's the love interest and fills the role of damsel in distress more often than not. Mordred, often portrayed as Arthur's illegitimate son and a traitor. It was his rebellion against Arthur which contributed to the downfall of Camelot and the death of Arthur. Spoilers. And of course, there are the Knights of the Round Table. Sir Lancelot, probably most well known of all of them, his son, Sir Galahad, the one who led the party searching for the Holy Grail, Sir Tristan, the one who fell in love with Isolde, or Sir Gawain, who had the encounter with the Green Knight. There are many more knights associated with the Round Table. In some lists up to 150, but going any further would exceed the confines of this video. Let's not forget the Black Knight! Most of us immediately think of this guy.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary.
'Tis but a scratch.
The Black Knight is not just one single character, but a trope of medieval storytelling, filling the role that is needed for the story being told. Most of the times though, Black Knights are antagonistic and evil. Morgan Le Fay, a largely unimportant character to early Arthurian stories, she would later on be depicted as an evil sorceress and antagonist to Arthur. A lot of modern interpretations are showing her as a version of the Celtic goddess of death and war, Morrigan, wearing all black and being surrounded by crow familiar. Now, 'tis but a scratch in the plentiful cast of characters in this canon. There are many more named knights. There's the Fisher King, Morgause, the Lady of the Lake, and many, many confusing family dynamics. Now that we understand the basics of the most important characters, let's move on and examine some art. Part 2, discussing the artwork. Now to the juicy stuff. Based on leaked art and playtesting concepts from before the alpha release, we can paint a picture of what to expect from Arthurian Legends. Some with high certainty, while others are just based on hard speculation on my part. We currently don't have any confirmation as to how big Arthurian Legends is going to end up being in size. But most estimate it to be a big set, maybe even going up to the 400 plus cards from alpha and beta. With the promise of a one set a year cycle, that wouldn't seem impossible, especially since development of Arthurian Legends art goes all the way back to 2019. Nothing I'm about to show you represents final art choice or game design in the set, please keep that in mind, but it's all made or has been commissioned by Erix Curiosa and has at least at one point been discussed for inclusion. Mike Savardi did a great write-up on this topic over at Collector Arthouse back in 2022, and I highly recommend checking it out. Most art pieces and test card designs in this video were taken from the Collector Arthouse gallery. The Roundtable by Margaret Organ Keane. Let's start with the one card that we already know is in the set. Revealed in Erix Curiosa's 2023 retrospective, the Roundtable is a 3-mana monument that reads, "Must be cast to your back row. Whenever you summon King Arthur or a knight, Sir or Dame to the round table, draw a card." This will provide a nice steady card draw in decks concentrating on these minion types. While a lot of these will probably fall under the mortal category and thus be affected by cards like King of the Realm, it's kinda sad that it does not trigger for existing staples like Highland Princess or the aforementioned King. The Sealy Code by Liz Danforth. Now this one is not only stunning, but a clear giveaway that Arthurian Legends will not be confined to the written stories, but will instead pull from a broader pool of myths from the region and time period. The Sealy Code is described in folklore as a group of fairies in good faith with the human race, helping people in need, especially with food. Provoked though, they would revenge any injury or insult. But there also exists an opposing version, the Un-Sealy Code, consisting of malignant fairies that are never under any circumstances favorable to mankind. So we might very well see a darker version of this code also appear in the set. But what type of card will this end up being? Just based on name and amount of characters, it will likely not be a single minion or magic. That leaves us with this either being a monument or an aura, which I personally believe it to be. Regarding mechanics, though, I have no clue. The Sealy Code is a court of fairy creatures, so this might be a tribal card, maybe very similar to the Roundtable, as it requires you to cast a certain minion type in order to gain resources, or maybe a field buff for those minion types, or like in the stories, it could favor mortals, maybe providing them with health or resistance. We will have to wait and see. Agravain by Drew Tucker. Based on the title of the artwork, it's safe to assume this piece is depicting Sir Agravain, another knight often associated as part of the Round Table. Here shown sitting smug on his armored horse, towering over a young man either about to be executed or in serious trouble. Sometimes portrayed as respectable, but often going by the title The Hard Hand, Agravain is an arrogant knight full of jealousy and malice. This is a complex piece depicting a whole scene to which I'm honestly just missing the context. But as a card, it will most likely end up being a minion or maybe a magic, as it's again depicting a whole story. Threshold-wise, I'm getting strong Earth vibes. Sir Tristan by Elvira Shekirova. This lavish painting takes direct inspiration from medieval artworks. It will be interesting to see if they keep the gold border on the card or just cut it down to Tristan. Tristan or Tristram is the central figure of several stories. Here he is depicted triumphantly standing on a slain dragon. The text beneath, written in Old English, translates to, "Tristram was very eager to try his luck and called his knights to him. 'Who dares to take on this challenge?' he asked. They all said, 'Let's leave the dragon where it is.' None of them wanted to put himself in danger. 'Well, I'll have to do it then,' said Tristram." The Ninth Legion by Lindsay Drums. This one goes outside the Arthurian Legends again. The Ninth Legion existed way before the events of Arthur are said to have taken place. The mystery surrounding the Ninth Legion revolves around them just vanishing at some point from all recorded history. To this day, we do not know what happened to them or where they ended up. Well, in this version, they must have died somewhere in Britain and been resurrected, Maybe by the sorceress Morgan Le Fay, building an undead army? Citadel of Screaming Pillars and Deadpool by Ian Miller. Now, I'm showing both of these paintings at once because I have no idea how they relate to the topic. It's Ian Miller's unmistakable style we've already seen before with cards like Warp Spasm or Ultimate Horror. Both of these are pretty much confirmed to be sides just by the nature of the aspect ratio. What these do, though, we can merely guess. With a name like Deadpool, one could assume some involvement with the graveyard, or maybe an effect like doubling Deathrite triggers. The Lady of the Lake by Séverine Pinault. There are several versions of the Lady of the Lake present in the Arthurian stories. She is not one single character, but a title given to several women throughout the years. The most prominent version of her is called Vivienne. She plays a vital role in many stories, being most well known for providing Arthur with Excalibur, but also responsible for the end of Merlin after he wouldn't let up pursuit of her, and serving as a foster mother to Lancelot after the death of his father. The framing of this artwork makes it just perfect for a new avatar. If she ends up being a minion against expectations, water element would be a given. And then there's this painting of Stonehenge by Jeff A. Mangus. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find the official title for this piece, but it's easy to assume we're seeing the real deal here, as Stonehenge is part of Arthurian Legends. One story written in Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of Kings of Britain has Merlin helping with transporting these stones, who originated in Africa and had been brought over to Ireland by giants. The stones were healing stones intended as a memorial to the British Celtic nobles slain by the Saxons at Salisbury. So healing stones, eh? Maybe a better version of Holy Ground? Just based on my pure speculation. It also couldn't hurt to have another spellcaster site in the vault next to River of Flame. While all of these have been confirmed to be included, or at least have been commissioned with intention to be used in Arthurian Legends, these next ones have not. The Holy Grail by Tony Studlow. There it is, the Holy Grail. Well, if this isn't a definitive inclusion in an Arthurian Legends set, then what is? We can safely assume this to be a relic without threshold. The Holy Grail is by all means meant to be powerful. But how could this power be translated to the game of sorcery? Well, we do have one potential version of it from playtests, this one. It's a 7-mana relic without threshold that reads, play on the middle side, any avatar that picks up the Grail gains 20 life. This destroys the Grail. And yeah, that kinda sucks. Or at least it's not the all-powerful tool I was hoping it to be. Just a 7-mana 20 life gain spell that you have to go and then pick up? Nah, I just can't imagine this to be a mechanic they're going with for the set. In a set all based around Arthurian Legends, the Holy Grail just makes sense as one of the big chase cards, and for that it's just too unexciting. Story-wise though, it makes sense, as when Galahad finds and picks up the Grail, he is then transported to heaven with the Grail, like entering a new life, leaving nothing behind. If it had the ability to, let's say, heal your avatar from death's door, that might change my thoughts. But there are other ways they could make it more powerful and still make sense. It could be some kind of protection, maybe when played for a turn, or protection from a specific type of spell as long as it remains in the realm, or just one of the most powerful mechanics in pretty much every TCG, let you draw cards. Well, whatever they chose to go with, I'm pretty sure it's not the version we're looking at. Black Knights by Brian Smith. Well, as I said before, in comparison to other characters, the Black Knight or Black Knights are simply a common vessel for storytelling in Arthurian Legends and medieval literature in general, so there's not much to add on my part here. They sure look threatening, exuding fire element vibes. Vengeful Squire by Lindsay Grummett. As Mike Savardi already speculated in his theories, this piece might either depict a young Arthur or his son Mordred, who will later on overtake Camelot while Arthur is out questing. This will probably end up being a low-cost minion or magic spell. Call to Arms by Drew Tucker. You can't ever have enough artworks by Drew Tucker. This one has been floating around for a while and shows soldiers forming a protective circle. Their shields bear a seahorse sigil while our eyes get immediately drawn to the mysterious figure in the center. To my understanding, this doesn't have any direct correlation to any Arthurian story, or at least not one that is immediately apparent. So this does fall under the maybe category regarding inclusion probability. Call to Arms will most likely end up being a magic spell, maybe a buff to your troops or a summoning of tokens or a tutor for a specific card type. Ring of Morrigan by Séverine Pinault. The Ring of Morrigan, or Morgan Le Fay, the evil sorceress, would make a great inclusion for Arthurian Legends. This version provides much needed card draw every time the bearer casts a magic spell. Also, it's always just fun to draw cards, and this artwork needs to be used. The ability to turn the bearer into a spellcaster is also really exciting, probably having a lot of impact in the late game state. 6 mana is a lot though, so this might change in a final version. King Arthur by Drew Tucker. This post was made by Drew Tucker in March of 2023. While he just calls this an inspired commission, I can't help but feel this art must be used somewhere. Also, would he really add the sorcery hashtag for just supposed fan art, posting this so far away from release? So in my opinion, here we have our first look at King Arthur, or at least one version of him. And there's no doubt that Arthur will be a powerful, unique minion. True Allegiance by Jeff A. Mangus. True Allegiance is another one we have the original card design for. It was planned at one point to be an elite aura, buffing minions on affected sides, as well as protecting them from any forced movement or being overtaken by the opponent. This one could very well end up in the set without many changes. The King's Sword by Séverine Pinault. Another tease on Instagram was made by Séverine, giving us a glimpse at a part of a larger piece depicting the legendary sword Excalibur, or again at least one version of it. Notably, it isn't stuck in a stone, but a tree trunk. Sometimes Arthur draws the sword from a stone, sometimes he gets it from the Lady of the Lake, sometimes both. Why not a tree? Doesn't make it any less magical. The cropping of the image makes me curious as to what is hidden from us. This might be a depiction of the sword in a scene, meaning this doesn't necessarily have to be the sword as an artifact spell. Now that we know what art is going to be used in the set, let's talk about some potential new mechanics. We know from print and playtesting that the Sorcery game design team has been trying out several mechanics before the release of Alpha and Beta. These mechanics were either unfitting for an introductory set, couldn't be figured out in time, or were just loose concepts to be furthered in a later set. Based on confirmed and unconfirmed artwork as well as these playtest concepts, here are my 3 picks for new game mechanics that might be introduced with Arthurian Legends. Number 1. Quick Magic and Counterspells. The only current instant speed card that can be played in your opponent's turn is Dodge Roll, a 0 mana magic that states, may be cast when an ally is attacked. An attacked ally may then move to another adjacent location to evade the attack. While this is the only current quick magic spell, there have been several as a big part of pre-alpha testing, with cards like Ordinary Counterspell, Exceptional Counterspell, Spell Block, and Near Miss. Now, it was certainly a smart move by the Sorcery design team not to include quick magic with the first set, as it complicates things, drastically increasing the learning curve for people that are newer to TCGs and generally causing headaches for game balancing. Now though, after a longer time testing, they might finally be ready to introduce quick magic properly into the game. Notably, there is already a stack in place for resolving card effects called the Timeline, so the foundation has been laid. For me, this isn't really a question of if they're going to introduce quick magic, but when. Also, I can't leave this artwork for Exceptional Counterspell unmentioned, as this mage reminds me a lot of a certain someone. Number 2. Questing. This is based on one single interaction Eric had with someone posing a question in the Discord. Eric responded by stating, I heard knights often go on quests in Arthurian Legends. Well, this could either be a nod to the quest for the Holy Grail, or it might indicate to be an even bigger part of set mechanics. The only current quest-like cards in the game are Sunken Treasure and Buried Treasure, which in most cases require the controller to complete several steps and thereby turns in order to complete the quest, and in this case, draw cards. So I'm keen to see how they could develop the concept further. Number 3. Sites that combine. This idea of having 2 or more sites that interact with each other when placed adjacent had already been playtested with the Tower of Babel in this stunning artwork by Dan Seagrave. Just recently we got to see an actual image of what one iteration of these test cards looked like thanks to Red Zone Rogue. In this example, the Tower of Babel is split into the apex and the base of Babel, both when together providing more mana and in this case an absurd 5 at once. There are also other ways sites could interact with each other, forming a larger minion for example. This mechanic I'm most unsure about for inclusion though, as Eric did mention the Arthurian mythos didn't provide much to go with in terms of crazy site design opportunities in comparison to the next set after Arthurian Legends, so we might have to wait even longer to see such designs make the game. Lastly, some possible predictions for new avatars in Arthurian Legends. Merlin first comes to mind as he is the mage of this universe, so having him be able to shapeshift each turn into a different minion in the realm might work for what the Sorcery team has in store for us. Also, the Lady of the Lake, being not a single character but a title given to a fairy or fairy-like human enchantress, might provide water players with a new staple avatar to build with. Morgan Le Fay or Morrigan, sorceress and or goddess of war and death, would provide a pretty cool option for an evil avatar in my opinion. Sorcery Contested Realm Arthurian Legends will be released sometime this year, most likely around the summer timeframe. But for this moment, this has been it for the video. I really hope you enjoyed. For me, I'm really excited to learn more about the set in the upcoming weeks and months ahead. But now, to you, what do you think will be included in Arthurian Legends? Did I miss anything? Leave it down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I see you guys next time.